On this flight, Dorothy Herman is the so-called pilot flying. She performs the takeoff with the Boeing 757-300. The passengers can track the position of the aircraft on monitors, and the view from the window is chilling entertainment to those interested in aviation. However, the pilots have the best views and even get paid for it, but they also have the responsibility of 250 passengers and lots of heavy equipment. The takeoff goes smoothly without any problems. Meanwhile, in the traffic control center, it is now very busy. Almost all of the airline's 40 aircraft are in use today and are coordinated from here. The flight dispatchers must be able to respond immediately to delays or dropouts. Here, for example, is the Eurocontrol tool. With this we can display all our flights, and here we can see that our Condor flight 666 to Heraklion has just gone airborne. It's now 4:22 a.m, so this means our guests will get to their destination on time. UTC is Greenwich Mean Time and the global time in aviation, so 4:22 a.m. is 6:22 a.m. in Frankfurt. We've got a nice tool here. This is our ACARS. We can send messages to the aircraft via the ACARS. For example, on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, National Football League results. The guests always want to know what's happening in the football, so we keep the crews up to date. It's the same with the Champions League. Whenever a goal's scored, we can notify the aircraft. 30 minutes after takeoff. On board, headphones to listen to programs are being distributed. The comfort of the passengers is very important to the airlines. They value punctuality, enough space and good service. Year after year, the Germans make more than 50 million holiday trips. Above all, entertainment and food are critically assessed. In a relatively short flight to Greece, there is a small breakfast and a short movie is shown. Max listens to music and sees if he can see anything exciting on the ground, but at the moment he can only see clouds. The aircraft has reached its cruising altitude of 34,000 feet and is now flying over the Alps. This is approximately 10,000 meters, and the pilots communicate with the changing air traffic controls on the ground and supervise the flight route.
Wir sind in Frankfurt von der Position losgerollt zur Startbahn West, Startbahn 18.
In Frankfurt, we have taxied from the apron position to runway 18. I've passed over the control to my colleague, who's the pilot flying to Heraklion, and we always change controls so that everyone can fly on one day. We had a takeoff weight of 105 tons, and our takeoff speed was about 160 knots. The 35-year-old has been flying for the airline for 12 years.
Es ist Verwirklichung eines Kindheitstraums von mir. Die Faszination auf Fliegen.
For me, this was my childhood dream, really. And my passion for flying is still huge, and for me it's always been a great thrill to be up here and look out at the view.
Einfach ein tolles Erlebnis.
At cruising altitude, some passengers may become a bit bored. Many only want to get some sleep after getting up so early. But if they do, they run the risk of missing the flight service. Shortly after the takeoff, the flight attendants have started preparations for food and drinks. Some of them have already served the drinks, and others prepare the breakfast. Although the flight time is less than 3 hours, on board there is something to eat for the passengers. Fresh baked rolls for all. The preparation in the narrow galleys is not very easy. Breakfast for 270 people, is this a challenge? Yes, but it's all a matter of organisation. If you've already done this for a long time, then of course you know every move and how to organise it best. It's not that difficult to make the rolls hot and present them nicely and please the guests. I have to take care that the buns are still warm for as long as they're served. Otherwise they become hard and then they don't taste good. It's like going to the bakery where you'd also like to get a warm bun when you went in.
ansonsten werden die hart und dann schmeckt es natürlich nicht mehr ganz so gut. Das ist wie beim Gang zum Bäcker. Da möchte man ja auch vielleicht auch noch ein warmes Brötchen bekommen.
In this flight phase, the pilots can sit back a bit. The route was carefully planned before the takeoff, and any deviations because of the weather, for example, are not necessary today.
Die Flugzeit ist ja heute circa 2,5 Stunden.
The flight time today is roughly 2.5 hours. The route leads over Munich and then across the Alps towards the Adriatic Sea and then further on. And about 200 miles before we get to Crete, we'll start the preparations for the landing.
Wo wir uns dann vorbereiten auf den Anflug.
The 31-year-old co-pilot has a challenging working day.
Extrem früh aufgestanden um 2.
Yes, I got up extremely early today. My alarm went off at 2:50 a.m. Then I went to the Condor, met the crew, had a briefing and then went to the aircraft.
Briefing gehabt und dann zum Flieger. Ja.
Who will land the aircraft today?
Das werde ich machen.
That'll be me, I'll do that. Is Heraklion a challenging airport?
Ja, es ist schon ein anspruchsvollerer Anflug.
Yes, it can be a challenging arrival. It's very hilly there, and when the wind comes from the south over the mountains, then it can also be a little bit shaky. But at the moment it looks good, so let's see.
Sieht ganz gut aus, also schauen wir mal.
Meanwhile, the onboard service is in full swing. 6 flight attendants to serve 250 meals isn't many. While it's now relatively calm with the pilots in the cockpit, the cabin is very busy. But the presentation of the meal mustn't be neglected.
Ich denke, bei den Gästen ist es wichtig, dass der
I think for the guests it's very important that the first impression of the food is good and that they look good. The smell of the warm rolls whets your appetite, but due to the early flight, as you can see, there are many guests who don't want to eat anything at all. They're just satisfied with a drink.
Gäste überhaupt nicht zu essen möchten, sondern mit dem Getränk zufrieden sind.
The food on board is taken by the passengers with a critical eye, and it's a part of the in-flight entertainment. The serving times are structured so that there's almost always something happening in the cabin. Airline food suppliers want to provide food that tastes and looks good, even when it's processed on board, and that's not an easy task. At an altitude of more than 30,000 feet, there are some factors to be considered. Low air pressure and low humidity alters the taste of food. Spices are less intense. Sauces should not be too liquid, otherwise they'll overflow during takeoff. The food should not be higher than 4 centimeters, otherwise the lid will not fit onto the small bowls. And there should be something available to suit everybody's tastes. The Boeing 757 has arrived over Greece. The preparations for the landing will begin shortly.
Meine Kollegin wird in Kürze den Landeanflug auf Heraklion beginnen. Wir rechnen jetzt kurz vorher unsere Anfluggeschwindigkeiten aus.
My colleague will soon begin the approach to Heraklion. We now calculate the landing speeds and the landing distance that we will need, and then we'll leave our cruising altitude at a certain distance from the airport. My colleague will be taking a different altitude from the flight director and will start to descend with the autopilot. We will then extend the flaps when we go deeper so that we can fly slower. This is done with this handle here. Then we'll bring our gear and the flaps into the landing position. Then my colleague will turn off the autopilot. This happens here on the control column, and we'll land the aircraft manually in Heraklion.
Das funktioniert hier an dem Steuerhorn und wird von Hand manuell den Flieger in Heraklion landen.
The flight attendants have cleared the food. The passengers have been asked to fold up their tables, put their seats in an upright position and turn off any electronic devices. The aircraft is on approach for the Greek holiday island, and there are about 15 minutes till landing. In the galleys, the flight stewardesses are busy cleaning up and billing. Shortly before landing, they will also have to buckle up. It's just before 9 o'clock in the morning. Many passengers have been in transit for 6 hours and are just sleeping. For those awake, the landing promises some more excitement. On the monitors, the flight route is displayed. Again, the pilots have the best view in the aircraft. The landing at the airport of Heraklion towards the west heads over the sea. The view is so clear that Dorothy Herman can turn off the autopilot early. Pilots enjoy these kind of landings.
200. 20, 10, 5.
After a flight without any problems, the passengers arrive before the scheduled time at their destination. The pilots are satisfied.
Hier die ganze Kulisse mit der Insel, des Meer.
The entire backdrop of the island and the sea in the early morning sun, for me, that's always worth getting up early
Von der
for.
Entschädigung fürs frühe Aufstehen.
For Max, the flight is over. Now everybody has to take care not to leave personal belongings behind. Meanwhile, the baggage has already been discharged and can be collected at the baggage claim. Most of the passengers get off in Heraklion. Some remain on board and fly on to Santorini, together with new passengers. The flight attendants say farewell to the alighting passengers. Goodbye and thank you is said 200 times. 1 hour later, the Boeing 757 taxis back onto the runway. The pilots take turns, and this time Captain Heinbochel is pilot flying. There will be a short stay in Santorini, and then the 8-handed crew will fly back to Germany. 11 hours later, by 3 p.m, they will land in Frankfurt.